and let's just play the video. So again, once again, this is the intro to The Legend of Vox Machina, which is a new series that was created by Critical Role, which is an awesome YouTube channel. Highly recommend checking them out, especially if you like D&D. They are awesome. They just started campaign 3. I love their stuff. I haven't watched campaign 3 yet, but I'm excited for it. But this is the new animation series that they kickstarted, and it was insanely successful. I believe, and Juan, thank you so much for the sub as well. Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. So this series started off as a Kickstarter, and they were only going to do, I believe, like 6 episodes, something like that. It was just going to be a small thing, a little short series. It was so popular that they expanded it to 12 episodes. Then they expanded it to 12 episodes and a special. And then they expanded it again to, I believe, a full season. Afterwards, it got purchased by, or they partnered with Amazon to make it an even bigger series. So it started off as just a Kickstarter, but now it has become this full series with a ton of backing. And yes, the animation company that's working on it is Titmouse, which are awesome, an awesome group of animators. As you will see, the animation in here is really cool. So with all that out of the way, let's actually watch this, because I keep saying it and I never actually hit play. So I'm going to be quiet now, and I'm going to hit play. So cool. I love this. Oh no. No, curse you, Sync Sketch. It was epic. You paused. You buffered. No. Of course. We finally get into the epicness and it paused. Curses. I'm going to refresh. And then we'll see if it can play through. Ah. Ruined it. Okay. Let's go. There we go. Ah. Hopefully it'll buffer through all the way there. It does have some Zelda vibes to it. I would agree. Oh, so good. I love this. It is going to be so awesome. I'm so excited. And it comes out February. Okay, February. For some reason, I was thinking January. February 4th. This, along with Arcane or Arcana, I'm so excited for these new series. Now, is there any 3D to do 2D techniques? I'm sure that they use quite a few. So, for example, let me actually make sure audio scrubbing is off. There's a scene here, like this spin right here. It wouldn't surprise me if these are actually 3D models with just some cell shading elements on them, or that they used stand-ins, CG stand-ins, and then drew over top of them. That way they could get the proper proportions and like all this complex camera motion without having to draw it manually. Especially when you've got a big group of people with a moving camera and it's rotating and panning and zooming in, all of that stuff. That would work really well. Now, something like this, where it's just a simple camera move straight up, that might not necessarily need a full CG scene for that. So I'm sure they've used some 3D to 2D. Aside from that, it looks to be mostly 2D. Now, let's see. This is where we're going to analyze when the internet dropped itself. Yeah, exactly. Last time we were just about to hit play before the internet cut out. So I'm glad we can finally do it. And let's see. And I can definitely give some feedback on your assignment, but we'll do that at the end of this analysis. Let's see. In Toon Boom, you can bring a CG background. So you would just animate that in Maya and bring it into Toon Boom. Yeah. So that's essentially what you do. If you actually have seen the Castlevania series, they use that quite a bit with these complex sets that you would have camera motions and would spin around. What they would do is just import a 3D scene and you draw over that. The complexity, it depends on how far you go. But it makes it so much easier than having to try to draw this complex environment that's spinning in 3D space and keeping the perspective correct and keeping your character correct in that. It's a great time-saving tool. And as animators, we want to save time so we can put our budget and all of our extra time in the important animation, the character animation, or the cool little bits, not just a room spinning around, which is cool on its own, but something that can be easily helped with technology. So when there is a redraw because of perspective, likely. Well, even then you could animate your camera in the 3D scene so it changes the perspective, and then you've got all of that built in. So yeah, there's a lot of cool tools that help with those situations. So let's jump in here and take a look at a few of the scenes that, at least to me, stood out and that I just really love. Honestly, I love the whole thing, but time-wise, we're probably only going to get to 3 or 4 scenes here. So I'm just going to hit play again, and we'll pause it when I see something cool, which is going to be right away. That bird is so cool. So, since I mentioned the bird, one thing I really love here is the flight mechanics. Flight mechanics are one of those things that a lot of people tend to get backwards. So I'm not going to go through a whole talk on flight mechanics just because that's a whole lecture on its own. But if you watch flight mechanics, oftentimes what ends up happening is that animators will animate the wings flapping down really quickly. They'll pop down and then slow up. So it's fast, slow, fast, slow. This is how the owl in Harry Potter is animated, if you look at that. Now, there's nothing wrong with that in the sense of stylistically, as animators, we can do whatever we want. But it is actually backwards from what actually happens. When birds fly, they go down slower than they go up. The up is actually the fast moment. So if we look at this here, you can see how fast those wings go up. We go from this really cool reversal. They're also really pushing the line shapes here. So nice clean lines. Comes in, you break the line, you get that overlapping action. You can feel the elbow of the bird leading the action right here. And let's actually make my brush size just a little bit bigger. Yeah, there we go. So the elbow is leading the action. Then we get up to the wrist right here. Breaking up that action. Up. And you get that nice reversal before comes through. And then down. And continues down. So this is still the downwards motion right there. So you get that nice flying motion. It's all these very graphical shapes. What you don't want with a flight is the wing to just go up, down, 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 and then reverse that. It's very graphical, and it's a breakup of action. Elbow, wrist, then flip, elbow, down. So it's that motion. Is it because they try to push through the air and the wind? Yes. So as the arms come down, they're pushing through the air and the wind. We're just going to slow them down. As they come up, let's kind of go full speed here. So you can think of it like swimming in a way. When you swim and you want to push forward, you're going to open up whatever you have, a hand, a flipper, whatever, and push in the water. That's going to push you forward. Now, when you bring the hand back, you're not going to keep the hand wide open and do that, because now you're just pushing yourself forward and back. You narrow your hand and you cut through the water so that you push or pull yourself forward, cut through, pull yourself forward. That's what a bird is doing. They're catching the air, pushing down on the air so they fly up. When they come back up, they knife through the air. They cut through so that they're not pushing themselves back down. That means that they're going to go faster, less air resistance. Additionally, when a bird is flying, if it's not pushing down, it's falling. So the moment that it stops pushing downwards, it is now going to start dropping in the sky, which means that if it doesn't want to drop too far, it's going to raise its arm as fast as it can in order to push down again. So you get that slower, and it's usually like just a few frames. Slower, fast, slower, fast. It's just that mechanics of it. Now, like I said, does it always have to be that way? No. Stylistically, we can exaggerate that. We can reverse it even to get a different feel of it. But if we're trying to go for a more realistic shot, we want to keep those mechanics in mind. Now, let's jump back in here. So just wanted to kind of give a quick nod on there. Actually, while we're talking about flight, I'm just going to give a link here to Brendan's body blog. This is a great website for learning about flight. And I'll just give the link to their tutorials page right here. You can learn a lot of great stuff about flight from this page. So look for the bird tutorials on there. It's really cool. So let's keep going here. I love that pull in of the bird. Okay, that reaction there. This reaction has something that I love. And it's one of my favorite things about acting shots, but it's also one of the things that I continually see get missed when people first started learning acting shots, and something I definitely missed when I started learning acting shots, which is the time to register that something's happened. So we have this shot here. You have this golden glow flowing right past the character. And you'll notice that the character doesn't track it directly. It passes, and we wait, and now they turn. It gives time for the character to react to it. They are not one-to-one locked to this object. We have reaction times. We do not react very quickly to many things. Something will whiz past you, and then after it's past you, go, what? And you'll turn your head. So this feels really nice. It makes it feel natural and not kind of prepped and scripted. So there's that moment. I really like that. But then as she turns, there's this moment here. So she finishes her turn. We'll say 238 right here. She stops the turn. Now, look how long it takes for her to react to the next thing. She holds that pose from 238 and she starts reacting on 242. So that has taken 4 frames before she reacted to whatever it is that she turned and saw. Now we can actually exaggerate that because her eyes have actually, like, she can see whatever she's looking at right here. So we could even say it's 235. So add 3 more frames to that. 7 frames. Then she reacts. We have the reaction here. That right there is crucial. If you do not have that pause in your acting or any type of reaction, your characters will never feel real. They need time to process things that they see or hear or do or even think. So you need to give that time for your character to pause. So right now she turns, pauses, and then reacts. And it's not a long pause. Like, again, depending on where we started, it's 4 to 7 frames, which is perfect because human reaction time, the average reaction time is about 1/4 of a second, which at 24 frames per second, which is what we usually animate in, equals 6 frames. Now, if you're really fast, you can kind of cut that reaction time to about 4 frames. So if you've got like fighter pilot reflexes. But sometimes, usually for people, it's 4 to 6, maybe up to 8 frames to react to something that we see. That is good. So she turns, she sees something, pauses, and then reacts. Perfect. Now, as she reacts, we see that that reaction is led by different elements. She's not totally moving all at once. Now, this is the thing with this shot. You'll see that she pauses and she holds perfectly still for about 3 frames. And then as she moves, we have the eyes closing, the brows coming down, the hand moving back, the body adjusting. And you might go, oh, well, everything is moving on the same frame. And technically that's true. Everything moves on that same frame. But everything is moving at different speeds on this same frame. So let's say you were to break up all of these motions into kind of a line. So you have, let's say, the head. You have the eyes. You have the brows. I wonder what we're going to spell here. Heb, brows. We have the shoulder. Hebs. We have the hand. Hebs. Let's go with just those for now. And then actually we'll have the fingers. I'm not even going to pronounce that. Hebshf. Hebshf. We've got all of those. And they all start from the same point. They're all kind of still on that hold. What they're not doing is moving everything an even amount. So this moves that far, this moves that far, that far, that far, that far. No. That would look very boring. That would look just bland. When you're animating a fast shot, we talk a lot on this channel about lead and follow. You have certain things move first, other things move later. Well, on very fast actions like this, and especially in 2D, when you're animating on 2s or 4s, sometimes you will need to start moving everything on the same frame in order to get your timing right. But what you do is you move them in different amounts. So if you look at the eyes are going from fully open to fully closed over 1 frame. That's 100% of motion. They're going their maximum amount. They can't go any further. You can't like close more than you are closed, and you can't open more than you're open. So those eyes, 100% motion right there. Now, let's go at the head. How much is the head tilting? Not much, really. You can see that from the nose, we're getting quite a bit of a tilt right there. But if you actually look at the chin, not too much. Why is that? Well, there's some squash and stretch and perspective to the chin. So as you do that, your jaw will come in a little bit. And because it's moving in perspective, it'll seem shorter. But the motion is not that much. It's not a huge motion. It's just a little down. So even though the eyes are moving 100%, the head is just doing a small motion right here. The brows, they're going from here to there. For the brows, that's still a pretty big motion. And Animated Paul, thank you so much for the sub. I really appreciate it. Man, 25 months. Jeez. 2 years. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So the brows, they're moving quite a bit. It doesn't seem like too much right now, but in terms of how far brows can move, this is definitely quite far. Now, brows could probably go all the way down here and then all the way up here. But they're still moving more than the head, respectively. So we get the brows coming down there, let's say. The shoulder. You'll see that the shoulder moves quite a bit. Shoulder moving quite a bit. We'll put shoulder. And then we'll actually put body here. Bod. Right there. So the shoulder moves quite a bit. Let's say, sake of argument, it's moving quite a bit. The body is barely moving. If you watch the neck and you watch kind of the rotation of the body, it's mostly just doing this with some sympathetic motion in the chest. Body, tiny little motion right there. Now the hand and the fingers. The hand is moving quite a bit. It's pulling out. The fingers are not moving at all. Even though like they're stretching out, their fingertips are staying in place. So fingers barely move. Hand moves quite a bit. It's not a huge amount. It's still just pulling out a little bit, but we end up getting this. And actually the body, I would say, is a little less here. So something like that. Now, is this how you should think about animation? No. I'd never really think about it in chart form like this. It gets confusing more than anything. But kind of showing it represented here is essentially just to show that as you're breaking down this motion, when you're breaking something down, it doesn't mean that only the hand moves, then the body moves, then the head moves, then the eyes move, and it's like frame one thing moves, frame two, another thing moves. We can do that, but we can also break up an action on a pose, and you just have some things not move nearly as much, other things move quite a bit. You're breaking up that action, not letting things just slide from one pose to the next. So whenever you create a breakdown, try to think of it in this way. What is going to move fastest? What do we want the audience to focus on? What's going to move slowest? And that's really going to make your breakdowns feel so much more alive. So right there, I love that pause. And then the way they break down that pose, beautiful. Now we get that nice reaction here. The eyes, you can see the brows now have finished their full motion here. So the brows have done their motion as the rest of the character is still turning and the hand is still going out the opposite way. So you're getting the nice contrasting motion here. She's not just turning like this where everything's together. Her body's turning one way, her hand's pulling the other. You get that nice anticipation. The head's down really low before it pops up. Great angle to the head here. It just makes it feel so much more alive. And it goes up, and then you just get a nice little hold, a nice little ease in. So she's not just popping up and then freezing. You get those two extra poses of just settling in before the camera turns right here. And if you look at the hand, watch how things settle. So another area that happens and creates kind of these weirdness, or I used to say like blandness in a pose, is when things move and everything kind of slides into place. So let's say if I move my hand from here and then I go into a pose like this, it kind of just whoop, and everything slides in and the wrist stops moving and the fingers and the palm all stop moving on the same frame. That feels kind of boring. Watch what's happening with her hand here. If we kind of think of it as different points, so you've got the wrist, you've got the palm, and then you've got the fingers. Let's kind of just do that. As you look at the wrist, for example, the wrist here has stopped moving. It has stopped rotating. The hand's still sliding to the side, but the wrist itself, right here, it's stopped. Right there. It's done its motion. The fingers, or actually, I put that in the wrong spot. Yeah, so the fingers have this big motion right here. So wrist, I should say, right there, it's like 95%, and then it stops. The fingers aren't even close to being done. Look at how far they are down here, and then they pop up. So the wrist is just going, while the hand pops up. They're not just easing in at the same time. They are progressively, like wrist stops, then hand, and then the arm actually stops after. So the actual sliding of the whole arm there. You get a nice breakup of the action. It's very subtle. It's only like 2 or 3 poses in there, but it helps to avoid that you kind of lock and everything feels dead and frozen. Very nice. I love the spin here and using the hair to cut the action. That's really cool. And just the posing in general. Look at that beautiful line of action. Line of action is one of those things that once you learn and you really can push, it makes your poses so much more dynamic. And what I really love about this is they're pushing their line weight as well. So line weight, we've talked a lot about this on stream, but I'll just do a quick talk on for anyone who hasn't heard about it before. Think of a elastic band. Now, when you take that elastic band and you pin it down, so we've got it tied down right here, and we pull it upwards. Depending on how you pull it, you can get a similar curve. We're going to get a kind of upwards curve, but we can shape it in different ways. We can get a curve that looks like this, or specifically, it'll be a little bit more like this. We're pulling straight up. If we pulled to the side, we would get a curve that looks like this. If we pulled the other way, we could get a curve that looks like this. Okay, now why is that important? The reason this is important is that in animation, we have different curve types that we try to use to make strong poses. We have straights, which is technically a curve. A straight curve, very powerful. We have C's and reverse C's. These are very dynamic curves and create a nice sense of motion. And we have S curves. That is the weakest type of curve, and it creates more relaxed type poses. So if we look at this body here, our line of action is a C. A nice simple C curve right there. Now, the reason line weight ties into our line of action is that when you're trying to do a C curve for your line of action, a lot of times, especially when I see students first learning, and I fell into this when I was a student, I would go, okay, I'll make a C. Whoop. Okay, now I need to change that pose and make it a little bit more dynamic. Okay, a C. Well, or technically I should say a reverse C. And then the character is going to do something else, and wow, it's always the same line. That gets very boring. Instead, think of it as line weight. Even though you've still got that same C shape or reverse C or whatever you have, you can push it. So for example, a pose might start off, let's say like this. That is a C shape or a reverse C. Now, as the character starts to stand up, maybe we push it to be more like this. And then by the end, it's more like that. It's still a reverse C on every single one of these. But you can see there's this feeling of motion. We can feel that curve moving upwards and unfolding and unfurling. If you start thinking of your curves in this way, you can make animations that are much more dynamic without having to do full reversals where you're going one way and then another and then another and then another all the time. Your characters are kind of flip-flopping. They can hold a pose and act within that and move in a more dynamic way. Exactly, there's force applied to the line. Exactly that. You feel like there's a motion to the line. Now, all of that just to say that this pose has great line weight, because it's not just a simple reverse C. If you look at the line of action, it's coming down here. It's almost a straight right up here before it turns very sharply through there. So it creates this very dynamic curve versus just wee. And this is actually something I struggled with for a long time when I started animation, because when I would do my curves, I always had the habit of making them symmetrical. And I know a lot of people who have this same issue, where if you imagine the start of the curve and the end of the curve, the peak is always in the middle. So I would do line of action. Oh, okay. Right in the center. Line of action. Pretty much right in the center. And it's always kind of this same curve. No matter what I do, it's almost always in the center. It took a lot of specific, like forcing myself to keep this in mind to make sure that I maybe have a curve that's a little straighter and then it bends, or have the curve just be a little bit there before the bend right there. So you really start pushing your lines. So just something to watch out for in all of your own shots. Think of that line of action, but also think of the line weight of the line of action. Now, what I also love about this is the way the rest of the pose flows off of that line of action. So, got this line of action right here. That's the main line right through there. You could argue that it's kind of an S shape because of the leg here, but it's really kind of just a C shape, or sorry, a reverse C. Now, with a line of action, you will have branches off of that line of action. And a common thing that I see happen on student work, and once again, I've fallen into all of these. So when I say student work, it's just part of the learning process. I've fallen into all of these, and it took a long time to learn how to improve myself. But one thing that really helped me is thinking of the line of action and how we can branch off of it. So oftentimes what I'll see is you'll have a line of action, and maybe it's really dynamic, but then the other elements, the arms, the other legs, will just kind of branch off of it in like these really straight kind of broken ways. And this is going to do two things. One, it makes the pose look very stiff. Even though we've got this underlying powerful line of action, the rest of the lines kind of just feel tacked on. It makes the pose feel stiff and kind of dull. It also takes away from the overall composition. So, a simple thought that you can use for this and how to improve this is that we want our lines of action to branch off into different lines. And the way I always think about it is like a flower or even a tree branch. So a lot of flowers, if you look at the way the stem pulls off, not the thorns, but the petals, they don't just stick out dip, like that and like that and like that. That just kind of feels bland. Instead, they flow off of it. So for example, it'll go out like that. It'll flow from that line. As it's coming around the corner, it might pull up this way. If we had a line going down, it might flow like that. And you can see how they pull off of the line and not just sticking straight out and like at a weird angle. They flow. This is what we want to try and do with our limbs a lot of the time. Not all of the time, but many times. It creates a more dynamic and fluid pose. So, for example, if we look at her pose right here and you look at the arms, the lines from the line of action flow through and out. Flow through and out. It's nice and flowing. The other leg here comes through and out. Look at how that feels like it's just this beautiful composition. If we were to hide that, even without the rest of the pose, you can feel that dynamic feeling to just the lines themselves. It's not, let's say we got that nice line here, but then the leg is just kind of hook, and the arms hook, hook, like that. You can feel that difference. Exactly, the branches carry the momentum of the line. Exactly. And you can do this in all sorts of ways. Now, another concept here is secondary and tertiary lines of action. There's not always just one line of action. It can be all sorts of different lines. So for example, we could have a line that goes, let's say like this. Well, a secondary line would be a line that kind of flows off of this, maybe something like that, but then flows into another line right here. So we get this secondary line that flows through the pose. Primary and then secondary. And you can have a tertiary line, which may be something like that. So you have 1, 2, 3. That works as well. But we'll see if we can find some examples of that later on. So line of action is a wonderful concept, but is not just a line. Done. Ha ha ha. There's line weight. There's pulling off of the line. There's tertiary and secondary lines. It's a really cool and deep topic and can really help push your posing. So really great line of action. Now, in terms of design elements, one thing I really love about this is how they're pushing the straights versus curves as well. So if we look at the overall shape of the body, you kind of usually have to take away hair and like things that overlap and flow, because those are being affected by outside elements like wind and whatnot. But in the pose itself, if we kind of just break it down, look at how on this side, we get this very simple line of the body into the leg right there. Very simple. It's just whoop, little bump for the leg there. Now on the other side, we get the head. Then we get, if we're not thinking of the arms, we still get the shoulder coming out here. Then we get the chest, the waist, we get a sharp pinch in here. And then we get through here. We even get a knee before we go into the leg, like so. Now, if we just look at those two lines, look how complex one side is versus the other. One side, it's essentially got two lines. Whoop, whoop. That's it. The other side, many lines. It's still not super complex. They're not adding like a ton of little details. But that is a beautiful design element. You keep one side a little bit more simple, one side more complex. And what that helps is to direct the audience's eye. When we have things that, for example, are even on both sides. So let's say simple and simple. It just creates a tube. If we have simple, or sorry, let's say a little bit more complex, and we just mirror that, it kind of looks very bland. Even if we did this, it just, again, looks bland. It's not a bad thing, but it's not as interesting as it could be. If we have something that's complex, and then complex on the other side, again, it's very messy to look at. So we try to mix and match these. Exactly, a contrast of detail. That's exactly what we're looking for. So you could have a straight versus a curve. And blocking spline, thank you so much. Oh, geez. Johan, thank you so much for all the gifts. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Geez, 10 gifts. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the subs. Oh, geez, that's super generous of you. Oh, we're going to be listening to this song for a while. Yay, I love this song. So I'm going to keep talking here while we're listening to this, but thank you so much, Johan. That's super generous. So we can have a straight versus a curve, for example. We could have what they're doing here, a curve versus a bend, like that, and a more complex shape. We're adding that visual contrast, making it so that our eyes have something interesting to look at. And whenever I'm trying to pose my characters, I try to think of that. Now, this does not always mean that you're going to have perfectly smooth lines, like a perfect smooth line versus a complex line right there. Sometimes you have anatomy. For example, there's a rib cage that goes into a waist, then into the hips, which might be wider, into the legs that might narrow down. It depends on your character design. Sometimes you have like the triangular superhero body, more like that. There's anatomical features that your rigs will have, which means that sometimes the waist, you can't get that perfect line right there. But what you can do is try to minimize it. So you have a little bit of a bend right in there versus a much sharper bend on the other side. That's still contrast. As long as you're not just getting that mirror image on both sides, or what I usually call it is hot dog body, where you have a rig that just kind of bends and they're just like a tube that's been bent. It kind of looks boring. Now, once again, this also depends on the style of film. So for example, Adventure Time, that is a perfect example of hot dog body, where Finn is just this tube that bends. And that's fine. That's the style of the film. We just have to be very conscious of that. So, big talk on just this one pose here, but I do just love this pose. It's so dynamic. And if we kind of expand on that talk just a little bit more, the other thing that they do really well here is that they have a two character shot, and they're using the line of action of both characters to work well with each other. So when you have two characters in a scene, you want their poses to complement each other or contrast each other. They shouldn't just feel like two random poses thrown in with no relation here. So what they're doing here is they've got this really nice strong line of action right there. And then the other line of action is not mirroring that. It's not doing this. That would kind of feel a little weird. Instead, you can see it's much straighter. So we have this complex line versus this simple line. Both lines are leading in right here. This gives the feeling that there's conflict. The characters are leaning towards each other versus maybe him leaning away in that way. Once again, his arms flow off of that line right here. Even the base, everything's flowing off. So you've got these two contrasting lines and they work well with each other. It's just beautiful composition. And then in terms of cinematography, this is another thing that I love cinematography. I love kind of breaking it down. They are using a power ratio here. So a power ratio is basically how do you make certain characters feel stronger in a scene versus others? Who's in control of the scene? And there are three main factors in there. There's a lot of different factors, but three main ones. One is size. Which character is bigger on screen? Well, let's just kind of block them out in a square. This character takes up this much space. This character, this much space. One is definitely bigger than the other. That makes him feel more powerful. The next part, height. A taller character will feel more powerful than a shorter character. There are ways to change that, but in general, you will have that feeling. Who's taller in the scene? Him. So we have the size and the height making this character feel imposing. The other thing that helps is camera angle. Are we looking at the character low or high? Our point of view is way down here. Like we're dealing with a low camera. We're almost sitting on the ground here as the audience looking up at this character. That makes them feel big and powerful and insurmountable. Okay, so those are three main things. Now, in terms of screen space, there's another aspect that I love. So this is the fourth aspect, and one of my favorite ones is how much of the space are they occupying? Now, the basic concept here is if you split your screen, let's say you have two characters, you will usually split your screen in half, which should be about here-ish. Nope, that's not straight. I'm trying to get a straight line here. There we go. That's ish, about half. So one character owns the screen left space, the other owns the screen right. And their relationship to each other and the way they take up the space helps show how much power they have in the scene. The closer you are to the center line, the more powerful you become. The further away you are, the less powerful you become. If you cross the line, you suddenly become very intimidating. Now, I'm using terms like powerful and intimidating. This can also just mean like you're in control of the scene. Maybe maybe it's a romantic comedy and the character isn't supposed to be evil. They're just supposed to be in control. They know they've won the situation. Maybe it's just a funny little thing and they know they've won the argument. If they lean into that space over that center line, it shows that they are in control. So what we're seeing here is this creature leaning in, and look how close he is to that center line versus this character here who is much further. That helps to show once again this character in control of the situation. His hand is getting right next to that center line and he's actually crossing it down here. So it shows that character is powerful, in control of the situation, and something to be scared of. It's not just some little monster that this character is going to defeat and just slap across the face and done. So as animators, these are all very useful elements that we can use to sell a scene a little bit more, make a specific atmosphere in the scene. So let's actually keep going here a little bit. That's just so cool. We've only gotten like through 2 scenes so far. So here we get this beautiful pull of the hand. Once again, it's that lead and follow. We feel that shoulder leading. It's going up first before it kind of comes down here. And now this shoulder comes up. So you get that round motion of that action. It's not just straight back. As she pulls back, you feel the hands dragging there as the elbow starts to pull back. And then right here, you feel the fingers pull in. That's just really cool. I love that contrast, how you go from that straight to bent right there. Over essentially, what is it, 3 frames? Yeah. So you have there 290, 293. So this is animated on 3s. And you get that nice sharp motion in the hands. And then once again, watch how she's leading. She's bringing her elbow down as her hand goes across. Her elbow whips forward. Her hand is still traveling the other way. The elbow is leading that action. And then, look at that. Her arm is broken. Her elbow is coming up as her hand is like, how would that work? Her hand was twisting that way, and now the elbow is going up. And then you get this beautiful, strong line here. And they're getting that nice design element in the arm. Just the really graphical shapes there. And then they have the hand flip up and then just snap closed. So good. So good. So they're not just letting the hand go up and close as it's going up. They go up, 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 snap it shut. Really nice. And this is just beautiful. I love these 2D effects. And the outline, the shading is just so good. Oh, so good. And you really feel that body. Like, look at how the body, that twist of the body leads that whole action right through there. And they're really pushing the line of action here. So here we have that line of action. Simple line of action here. Nice C shape, or reverse C, I should say. Right there, they've reversed it. And then you can, if you count the head here, so the head kind of goes through there. Now we're starting to get a little bit of an S shape. And then right there, nice reversal. So just thinking about a nice, powerful line of action. To turn each body part into a different effect when doing a smear, so fun. Yeah, it is. It really is. And it's one of those things that it takes a long time to practice and learn. For anyone who's starting animation, it just takes time. You need to basically exaggerate your spacing. And that's where you're going to start getting those smear frames. Because to make a motion that fast, anatomically, we can't just like move the arm up. It's not going to work. So we have to smear it and bend it so that it connects properly. I also love the way this hand moves. Like if you compare both hands, one hand barely moves at all. Look how far the other one went. It just gone. And this could look like a pop. Look, it goes from here all the way there. Look at that. Big, huge motion over one pose change. Why does that work? Because the staff connects them together. Look how close the staff is right here to where it was before. As it comes down, the hand is right where the staff was. And we get this pull right there. So we're just feeling that kind of quick pull down there. It stays connected before it's out of sight. Very nice. See, did you do the pixel animation walk a few weeks back? I was watching the VODs yesterday. Oh yeah, that pixel walk is awesome. I love that pixel walk. So good. So let's see. Let's keep going through here. Okay, we're just gonna go one scene at a time. Um, so right here, one thing I love is just that overlap of the roar. Instead of just kind of up and then down or just freeze, or yeah, they have that little shake of the body. And essentially, once again, it's that lead and follow. You have the body kind of twisting a little bit here. So you can kind of feel a little rotation that way, just a little bit. But we have that head going from kind of over to the side, then up. The head leads through. Now the body drags. As the head kind of reaches its end here, then the body starts to lead the other way. We get that change of direction. Now the body is leading the action as the head keeps turning. And you get a nice, simple contrast. And it looks complex. Like if you look at the motion here, it feels really dynamic. But when you break it down, it's very basic. The head going that way, just a simple arc of the head, and the body kind of dragging behind it, and then overshooting and turning. So it's one motion doing this, the other motion doing that, and then back. That's it. And this one led, and then that one changed direction. There you go. Nothing complex, but it looks cool and it feels good. And then the hips, we just get a slight motion going that way, and then a slight reversal as well there. But it's mostly the chest and the head. A lot of really awesome motions, when you break them down, they're not complex. It's not like things are just going all over the place in these crazy ways and just like extra everything. No. A lot of times you break down a motion, and cool motions can be very, very basic. It's just the way they connect with other very basic motions. And this is the thing that master studies help with. Master studies, it's not just about like tracking the spacing and things like that, looking at poses. It's finding out how something that looks so cool, what are the building blocks to make it? And oftentimes you'll find out that, oh, it's not so bad. For a roar like this, I would see a lot of animators try to do this big like shake of the head and shake of the body and shake of the shoulders to really get that power. And it's like, no, you get a little whoop of the body, and then the head just keeps going. That, and exactly, contrasting motions. That's really what it is. It's just that contrast of the chest and the head turning in different directions here, and the way they turn it. You get that nice sharp angle of the chest right there. Now we've got this next scene here. This is one of my favorites. There's just so many good posing elements, and oh man, we're not gonna get through all of this. It's just so good. So I love this for a lot of different reasons. One, we've got a run. We've got a nice, powerful run here, and runs are one of those things, runs and walks, they are hard to animate. And part of what makes them hard is a lot of people, when they first start animating them, don't push them enough, don't exaggerate, especially with runs. And tend to focus on too many in-betweens. So essentially what the characters are doing are they are just constantly moving and moving and moving and moving, and there's no pauses to things. When you're doing a run, it's nice to hit extreme poses and then exaggerate your lines and really go for these dynamic poses. So for example, here, let's go to where we can see the run. Look at this pose right here. He's pushing forward, and that line of action it's almost a straight. It's a slight curve. Very powerful. You've got this arm pushing forward, and he's not just straight like this, it's in perspective. So he's pulling his arm in front of him. We see that twist in the body here. Big lead there. We see the back muscle there, the line of the back right here. The other leg is pulling off of the line of action here. It's not just straight out, it's pulling off of that line. So you get a nice, powerful posing. Next pose, they're still exaggerating that line of action. So we went from a straight, and now we're starting to curve it a little bit more. As he comes through, reversal. Nice, big, powerful motion. And the reversal doesn't come from the chest. This is a common kind of misconception with runs, is that there's a lot of like this motion going on. If you were to run like that, you're going to run out of breath so fast. Because the moment that you curl your body in, it compresses your lungs. Which means that as you're doing this, you're constantly like compressing your lungs, which is going to get your lung capacity to be almost nothing. Instead, the body tends to stay pretty straight. There's going to be some motion, but it's the legs and the hips that are really doing a lot. So as you see here, there's this big reversal, but it's the legs that are helping with the reversal, a little bit of the hips, and the twist of the body. It's this motion that's helping to once again push the reversals, because he's not twisted up, he's twisted down this way. So kind of flattening out there. And then you once again start going into there before reversal. So really powerful right through there. And look at that line of the leg right here. Just creating a nice graphical shape. Now, another thing I love here is very quick, so it's easy to miss, is the jump from Pike right here, the little character. She's down here. Look at this anticipation for the jump. She's bent right in half. Her arms are dragging back, flowing off of the line of action. So you get that nice little compression there. Right here. Look at that beautiful compression. She's bent in half. That leg crushed right in. Beautiful arms. They're starting to swing through in that beautiful line. Just swinging through. And then in one change of pose. I'm not saying one frame because this is animated on twos, I believe. So swing one. Yeah, so this is on twos. So on the next pose, look at that line of action. It is straight. And what they're doing is that they're really helping to enhance that kind of pull downwards. This leg is not way out here. It's not kind of kicking out and like doing something like this when she's jumping, a wide stance. They're essentially creating this line where everything is pointing down to where it came from. This arm is starting to lead because she's using her arms. We saw them leading the action before to keep going up. They were down here before and now coming up. And then look at that. The arms are all the way up as the legs are starting to rise. So you get a nice contrast. Up and then legs keep going and they still keep going. And she just ends up boop, right on the shoulder there. And the arms, as the legs continue to rise here, the arms kind of just stay in place and finish their arc. They ease into that motion. So we have this offset where the arms started very quickly. Then as they slow down, the legs curl in. And yes, this is from Critical Role's new animated show, which is Legends of Vox Machina, which is going to be coming out February 4th. And this is, I'm super excited for this show. So let's keep going here. And should mute that so I don't accidentally hit play again. Just get a little blurb of sound. So here, this is something I really love. It's just a step. Honestly, like it's not much. We've got from frame 389, he takes a step, and then it cuts 399. 10 frames. We've got 10 frames of a shot here. As an animator, you're going to get plenty of these. You're going to get plenty of these extreme close-ups that are less than a second long of a character pushing a button or grabbing something, taking a step, slipping, just twitching, like nothing at all. But in those 10 frames, they told a story. They told us something. And that thing is that this character is insanely powerful. They take this step, and not only do they step, it hits the ground and it crushes into the ground. And it's just so cool. Now, how do they do that? How do they make that feel powerful? Well, there's just a few small things, but they make a big difference. So the foot comes in here. It's coming up into the scene. We hit this pose, which is a very cool pose, by the way. Even just for a foot, it's got this really dynamic shape. You've got that curve. You've got these little speed lines all over the place, so we can kind of see that it's headed downwards. And it holds this pose for quite a while. So frame 390, it holds for 2 frames. It's not just and coming down. Now the next frame, we've got it up here. Let's add a little bit of ghosting here just so we can see it. And let's add some tint. So let's go, not black, blue and green. Okay. So it comes up. The next frame is not an ease out like we would expect and then a slam down. It is going up, holding, and then the very next pose, it's going so fast it's popped out of frame. It just slams down. Hugely powerful. And then it hits the ground and we're already seeing it pop backwards. Now, why does this not feel like a pop? Well, it's because one, it's animated on 2s. So we have that extra little time. If this was animated on 1s, you would essentially have a frame right here where it would actually start to ease down a little bit and then slam. But since we're animated on 2s, we can kind of skip that. And it just creates a different style. Now, as it's coming down, it hits and then slides back. The reason this doesn't feel like a pop is because the knee keeps going forward slightly and the foot is arcing. If we look at the toes, it goes forward and the line of the foot that it creates is an arc backwards that flows into that motion there. So we feel that curvature of the movement here. If it had gone like straight down and then across, that could have felt kind of poppy and weird. So let's actually get rid of this. Beep. So we get that step here, and then right there, we get the knee. Look at the spacing of the knee. It comes down, slam. And as it does that, you feel the crack of the ground. So what's making this powerful is not just I'm going to use my hand here, the hand or foot in this case, hitting the ground and just cracking it right away, just right there. It's hitting, pausing for a little bit in the sense that nothing really has happened yet. We see some tiny little cracks right here. But then it's that secondary action of the knee coming in, pushing down further, and that's hitting it. So we get that 1, 2 motion. And it just creates this really nice, like, slight resistance before it buckles. And it's really cool. And then we get that kind of bounce back right here, where now the knee is coming forward. And then holds. And this is just a cool effect where you just essentially hold that pose. You see this a lot in anime where they're going to punch something or hit something and it hits and they just kind of hold on that hit, hold on the reaction of the punch and let us revel in it and kind of enjoy the power of it before it cuts. And then once again, beautiful jump right here. The way they're making this jump read is it starts really wide. Like, look how much space he's taking up on screen. His arms are way out. As he jumps, everything comes in. We lead with that chest. The chest is going up there as well as the head. This arm drops really fast. Look at that. From one frame right into his side there. The other arm comes down a little bit, and then even more. This arm is overlapping behind the character and dragging that huge axe, while the feet, once again, everything's pretty much pointing down and creating that V shape right there before he starts to reverse here. You get a twist of the body. So cool. And then you see that leg come up right through there. Such good posing. So good. And then a nice free, just moving hold right there. And the thing that I love about this moving hold is the contrast. You have one arm coming out that way, the other is going out the other way, back there. It's essentially stretching out versus just sliding across the screen. So cool. And then we've got this next one. Let's see, how much time do I have? I did want to take a look at people's work, so we might call it here for the analysis. If people want to see the rest of this, we can do another analysis at another time. But we might call it here. I love this shot. Let me actually play it one more time for anyone who hasn't seen it. Plus, I want to just watch it again. So let's turn off the drawings and we'll just play through it. I've probably said so cool probably more than 20 times. I love this. And especially with the music too. Oh, I didn't turn off my drawings. There we go. Great musical timing. Sound design is not something we talk about too much on this channel because I'm an animator, I'm not a sound designer. But sound design is like the animator's best friend. They take what we create and make it so much more than you could ever believe it could be. The way they time sound effects, the way they time the music, the way they time everything, it can make our shots just god tier. And nothing's changed in the animation, it's just the way the music and the sounds help with it. It's so cool. I've always wanted to study sound design, just for the sake of it. It seems like it would be a really cool thing to study. But yeah, I am so thankful for sound designers. Good sound designers make life, or make animation so much fun to look at. So long as I've seen Bo go without tangents. I guess you could kind of say I went without tangents, but at the same time, would like the tangents of, like, for example, talking about the posing here and all of that, would that still count as a tangent? I'm not sure. Like all of this talk here, that would kind of count as a tangent because it was analyzing the animation. So I don't know. We'll have to ask the judges on that one.